So Chris and I are really excited. We have a container coming up in January, and we are setting the vibe and talking about some of the stuff that's going to be going on. There's a lot of amazingness that's coming in. And whenever we have conversations, we end up just ripping around so much magic. So that's just what we're going to do today.
Oh my God, yes. We're so excited. I think that what I'm seeing just in the energy field of everyone right now is that there's this huge transitional moment. Like everyone's stepping into their magic, into an elevated sense of power and just this deeper activation of truth in 2024. And what I'm seeing with just clients and some of my friends on this path is that we're seeing a dissolving happening, like just in their immediate surroundings, almost like a tower moment, but things are being cleared out so that we can more powerfully step into that fullness version of who we are called to be. Michael and I, we talk about like the spiritual disruption that's happening, and we're like really called and drawn to people that are stepping into that leadership and just being brave to express themselves as the divine. So excited to talk about that today.
Yes, so good. So I'm going to get distracted. There's so many people we love that are here in the comments,
Yes. Hey
saying hello to
guys.
everyone. Thank you for joining us on this Saturday morning. Yeah. And I think I love that you're talking about this as well, because in my work, using hypnosis to really shift people out of things that are getting them stuck and like into who, they truly are and living their best life, really. This is something that I see so often. And I think there's some pieces run so deep that we might not even realize when we have these like little bit holding us back. I was working with this woman yesterday who has a PhD in psychology, and she does all of this incredible leadership work, and she really wants to step out in a whole new way. And there was this part in her session, we tapped into something, we did all this magic, all this weaving, and yes, and envisioning this, stepping into it. And then there was like this little, and I was like, yeah, what's that? What's that? Let's go into that, into that, into that. And it was like this little piece, this little emotional piece that was stuck there, that like fear of being rejected. And it was funny because she said to me, which is something you hear all the time, I thought I had worked on this, which is like so often, like we've done so much work, but we don't realize like when we ask for more, when we ask to be more truly ourselves, for more visibility, for more whatever it is, it's like we can run into these edges. And I think in the beautiful work and the beautiful conversations I feel like you're always having, Chris. I always feel
Yes.
like my light shines brighter after I tune into you. But then there's like these like also letting go of these little fragments of the past. I feel like it's such an amazing part of this journey.
Yes. No, I do feel like that those pockets of, you can call it shame. I talk about shame being this emotional signature of unworthiness. And some of it is so coded and it's like it's so nuanced and it's so deeply in us, like just from the coding and the programming conditioning. But part of stepping into your truth and coming into that fullness version of who you're called to be, essentially what you're doing is you're bringing consciousness, you're bringing light to those shadows and to those parts of us that are afraid to be seen. I think that why I'm so passionate about this work, especially like helping people connect to their authentic power and purpose, is because I had lived a life, particularly just my whole teens and childhood and young adulthood, not feeling safe to be seen, not being feeling safe to be my full self. And that's still a journey that I'm on. But I think that people that really tap into what we both call the star frequency, it's really activating a level of spiritual worthiness. It's an understanding and a claiming of your power, and your understanding that purpose is to express yourself unabashedly as the divine. And I think that that's really what you and I are really passionate about in terms of what ascension looks like, is to help others really co-create, but also mirror each other, become mirror reflections of the divine for each other. And I think that that is so activating, that's so contagious. And I'm really excited about just doing this work because while it is quote unquote heavy, I don't think it always has to be. I think like you and I are really on this path of like really spiritual liberation, but through this lens of activating our creativity, our magic, our superpowers, all of those things. And I think that that's also the giftings that we're receiving too as we go on the spiritual journey.
I love that you said that it doesn't have to be heavy because I feel like that's such a big thing in my world too. It's like people sometimes say, "Oh, I don't know if I want to go there." I'm like, "No, we're gonna go. We're gonna go to the like deepest, darkest places, but we're gonna shift through it in such an incredible way." And I find too, it's like someone said this the other day. I'm like, "Oh, that's what it is." I think with time, you learn to hold a really high frequency for healing, and so it's while you're dealing with things that are really deep, it's like you're coming up into it rather than getting lost in the digging up a bunch of
Oh,
painful stuff and then sitting in it, I think, which is what you're saying.
yeah, I see that ascension is a vertical spiral, right? And so
Yeah.
we're like coming into these higher frequencies and we're releasing. I think that what's so interesting, and I heard this recently about just like how our natural state is unconditional love. Our natural
Yeah.
state is unconditional acceptance and gratitude and appreciation. It's really this unlearning of all of the codes, all of the conditioning that sort of keep us entrained within this matrix frequency. And I think that part of what is very spiritually liberating is this heart intelligence and the soul intelligence that many of us, I would say so much of the planet at this moment is disconnected from. And so the people that kind of what you're saying are stepping into why am I here? What is my contribution of love to this planet? How do I become more aligned to the version of myself that spirit, God, the divine, universe, whatever you call it, has called me to be? That in and itself is such a courageous act of rebellion, resistance, whatever it may be that you call. And I think that those of us who have stepped into doing this work, we may have been drawn in through manifestation or this understanding that we can consciously create our reality. And that's like the shiny carrot. But what we realize underneath that is this transformation of becoming. And so
Yeah.
it's less about the actual desire, the abundance, the relationship, any of those things on the outside, when we realize, no, we're becoming vibrational match to this highest timeline version of ourselves. And I think that that's really what I use in my own practice to decide, oh, when I make these decisions, am I stepping into the version of myself in my highest timeline? Or am I repressing that? Am I holding back? Am I leaving something unexpressed? And I think that that's where you and I are really aligned in wanting to help create a container where that divine expression just becomes the default.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying too, because I feel like when you with your "or" there, or am I getting distracted from the seeking the thing that I want from the being the embodiment, right? And I think that's something, especially now, it's I agree, like, manifestation is becoming such a big thing, but I think it's so easy to get lost in the desire, and then it's I'm no longer actually in the experience that I wanna have. Yeah, I'm no longer in that divine expression. I'm no longer in that present enough to even be in the state of gratitude to be that receiving signature. It's like some,
Mm,
and I definitely experienced that this year as well. It's like somewhere along the way, you get caught up in the like seeking energy. And it's so interesting. I almost feel like when you talk about it, it's like we're doing cleanup, isn't it? We're not
yeah.
starting from ground zero. We'll be back together. It's like we're almost there. Let's refine. Let's refine. Let's refine.
Yes. I think who I'm speaking to and who we are calling in really just as we co-create this new paradigm together is those of us that I know for me, my awakening started 8 years ago and it was this like stirring in my soul. This is what I call it. This like deep sense of questioning of why am I here? What's my purpose? What's there must be something more to life. And I think as my awakening moved me to through my healing and transformation and expansion, really in that shift, it's this trust and this knowing that you're made for a purpose. And I love that people that I get to engage with now and people that are on this journey, there is that questioning, there is that curiosity. And to me, I call that the spiritual invitation. That's God's invitation. And we hear this all the time. We hear it in the Course of Miracles, we hear it in the Bible that many are called, but only few are chosen.
Mhm.
And those that are chosen are the ones that are answering the call. So if you are somebody to me that answers the call and is like actually stepping in faith and being like, oh, there's more to life. There's something else I'm here to do. There's something like calling in my soul, whatever it is, that in and itself is to me just an inspiration. I just love this. I love this even being in conversation with people like you, with some of my clients where I'm just like, thank you for being here. Thank you for answering whatever your call looks like. And that call can be so spread out. It could be like to start that business, to become more visible online, to share your art with the world, to release your music, whatever that is. Like all of us have that calling, and the universe is this intelligent system. So if all of us are coming into that highest expression of love within each of us, the system succeeds. If not, if we fall into the victimhood of being less than, or we're falling into the programming or the coding that we're not worthy, I'm here to really tap in and celebrate people, to speak identity into people so that we're transcending this pandemic of unworthiness. I truly feel like that is the mindset that's really holding us in this frequency, or in this holding pattern of the versions of ourselves that aren't worthy. And so I don't know, that's just what I'm excited about, and just like really inspired by people these days that are really tapping into the best versions of who they are and really answering the divine call, which is, I'm not gonna lie, it's sometimes scary, right? It is scary.
I love that. A pandemic of unworthiness. What a way to say it. And it's interesting because I know you mentioned shame, which is something that holds people back so much. And I don't know if you find this as well, but I find that that's something that comes up in the claiming of this journey and of stepping out. And it's almost like what you just said to me is it's almost like this reframing about being seen. I think a lot of people, particularly people that wanna do good for the world, will have this thing where it's, "Oh, but I can't have too much attention on me." It's, "Oh, but I can't claim that. Oh, it's that's not like, I could be a good person and somehow a good person isn't in alignment with that." Do you see that as
Oh,
well?
yes. I heard Eckhart Tolle say that all forms of resistance, uh, is a form of unworthiness. And I was like, oh my God,
Oh,
this is so interesting. All forms of resistance are some kind of unworthiness. And so I was really kind of connecting to that. And I just thought about just how society weaponizes shame. And it gets to a point where the programming, it doesn't even, it conditions us with shame, and then they don't even need to shame us. We
yeah.
appropriate the weapon, and then we learn how to shame ourselves. And then I think about it, I talk about this all the time with people like Kim Kardashian, where people are like, "Oh, she's so shameless." And they're saying that as if having shame is a good thing. And I'm like, here's someone who's actually liberated in her expression and her success. And we're thinking that, oh, to not knock her down a peg, we could say that she's shameless. And in my worldview, it's not a good thing to have shame. It's not a good thing to be in bondage with a signature of unworthiness, a signature of not receiving, of not being able to be that full version of yourself. It's like I've lived decades worth of shame. And I've stepped into a space of liberation. And this is what we talked about last time, where hurt people, but free people. And it's like when you step into that spiritually liberated self, is what we're really calling people to do, is to transcend this pandemic of shame and unworthiness, and to step into the opposite, which is you are loved, you are perfect, you are called for big things. And so most of us, we have to be visible, because if not, you can't create that ripple of goodness. And I think of it like I always say, like the first lit birthday candle. It's, we want to be, a light worker is the first lit birthday candle, where you become lit up by the divine, by these higher frequencies. And then you take that candle, and that gets to light all of the other candles on the cake. So I think that that's really just, I don't know, to me, I think it gets to be exciting. And for me, being in community is actually what has accelerated this activation for me so much more, because when you get the divine mirror reflections from your friends and from other spiritual warriors, like what it really does is it's an activation. It gives you that permission to say, hey, it is actually safe for me to be seen. Hey, actually, when I step out in faith and I be the fullest version of me, I am calling in more abundance. I am calling in more magnetic relationships. I am doing my part to create healing and love and abundance and prosperity on the planet. So like I don't know. I think that there's that collective shift that's also happening where this healing work or this expansion work doesn't have to be done in isolation. Doesn't have to be done like I've had those moments like in the fetal position in my bed, like crying, and at the same time, I'm also so grateful to have friends around the world where I share and do this work with.
Yeah, and community really allows us to, because one of our biggest fears is to be rejected and to not have that connection that we're seeking, right? And so when we have that community, we're able to connect to that. And so it's, oh, there's others that are on this same path. I'm not
Yeah,
crazy. Even my original tribe, I don't connect
yeah,
with so much. And I have this new tribe, and we're all holding this vision together. And you're like, you get me,
yeah.
right? Like we talk, and immediately it's, oh yeah, yeah, I'm experiencing that too. Oh yeah, I'm growing through this as well.
Being seen in that way is just so healing. It's so
Yeah.
gratifying. I always say Dorothy, she's like going on her hero's journey. She leaves her old world behind, which a lot of us do. If you're leaving behind that 9 to 5 or that marriage or that old paradigm version of yourself, you're basically that's the metaphor of you going to Oz. But the thing is what people forget, they think going to Oz is scary, but it's no, she meets the Scarecrow and she meets the Tin Man and she meets the Lion and she makes all these yeah, there's like some adventure there, but she meets all these friends. And that's what I also truly love doing in this work is that as we entrain ourselves in this higher frequency, really what we're calling in is people to help come play in this on the edge of creation to really push those boundaries in terms of what is possible, and I think that that's really why I love just the work that we do, just working in the space with entrepreneurs and high performers, because there's already this suspended belief in terms of what is possible, what the divine wants to create in them. It's fun to work with people where they've given themselves the permission slip to do. I want to ask you though a question for you, like,
Yes.
um, in terms of really, because I know that this has been like an evolving expression for you through your journey, your former life, but also current life as an artist and choreographer. And then you really stepped into this work as a spiritual leader and with all of the amazing work that you do. How is that authenticity journey like for you evolving? And what does that look like in terms of this new unfoldment of who Michael gets to be and who Michael is today and who Michael's going to be tomorrow or 5 years from now? Yeah. What have you learned on being on that path?
I feel like it exists on a continuum rather than a destination. It's like
Mm,
layers
nice.
that you keep peeling away. And I think one of the biggest things that I've been growing through in the last couple of years is this realization of it's me is the authenticity, not like in a box or like in a specific cast. Like I feel like we go, oh, I'm a therapist, I have to be like this, or oh, I'm a yeah, a business person, I have to be like this and I have to look like that. And anything we do where we give ourselves a label, like we automatically we get the matching behavior and actions for it. So, like, when you get promoted to being a manager and you were always late, like, suddenly you're 15 minutes early and you get a blazer and you're just like, we see that identity and we step into it. But the most divine identity that we can step into is the identity of ourselves. So
Mhm.
not going, let me like put on this hat, let me do this thing, let me be all of it. And that's where for me, the artistry and all of the different pieces have been like merging in my business. Is let's just what if we just play and there's no limits on how things can be expressed? And I think in that there's this continual journey, as I'm sure you experience as well, of running into edges where
Yeah.
it's really painful. And it's so funny
Yeah.
because it'll be like a new level of expression and I'm when I'm on a high and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited, I'm stepping out. And then people feel the energy and they're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I experience usually polarization where when another layer peels away, like more people come in that are more excited and people fall away. But often it's followed, and I don't think we talk about this a lot, by like pain and
Yeah.
fear that comes up. There's very often a very intense wave of fear that follows. And it's been really obviously interesting to navigate. Obviously, I have a ton of tools because of what I do. But even with the amount of work that I've done, it can be really extreme, that pain and that fear that can come up afterwards.
Oh my god, that's so true. I think sometimes we forget that while it's like exciting and fun to come into this expansion and to up level, there's also a grieving process of the old identity. I know I've had to deal with that too. Is, oh, there's this version of myself that I had to create to protect myself, or to keeping myself small wasn't an act of disrespect or harm to myself. It was like a preservation of safety for myself through the years when it wasn't fully, I wasn't in an environment where I could be fully expressed. And so I think that you're absolutely right. Just being able to do both sides of the coin in terms of the expansion and the creating and the building, and then also just like holding space for this version of yourself that like is maybe dissolving, or just, or even relationships or friendships, or yeah, just parts of yourself that are moving away.
Totally. And I think like the other piece that's coming up as you're talking has been doing this really deep shadow work, but in a way of bringing love to the shadow. I think a lot of
Mhm.
us do work in a way where we're trying to escape from our shadow. But what I've just it doesn't really work because you're taking your attention off this part of you and being like, "I don't like this part of me, so I'm not gonna be that anymore. I'm gonna focus on this. I'm gonna write this in. I'm gonna visualize this, and I'm gonna be this version of myself." But now this version, because it's not your attention's not on it, now it's, like, free in the subconscious to run you from the backgrounds like a puppeteer, right? And so it's really about actually seeing that part of you and going, "Oh, I see this part of me. I love this part of me. This part of me isn't bad. It's part
Yes.
of who I am, and I don't need to segment myself to be whole. I actually need to bring love to all of the parts of myself, bring love, awareness, attention, and light to all of the parts of myself." And that's actually when I become more whole and more authentic, because I'm also not seeing myself in like a fragmented way, right? I'm not just focusing on the good. I think that's where we can like slip into like this like really conflicting ego states where we flip
Yeah.
back and forth from feeling really amazing and then feeling like the shame and the guilt spirals, because that's actually they're coexisting on these like different levels of awareness instead of actually bringing more and more into the whole. And so we can be more whole, more love, more stable, and have just acknowledgement and compassion, understanding for those parts of ourselves that maybe we wish we weren't there, but actually start to dissolve, not from running away from them, but from love and integration and understanding.
Oh my god. So brilliant. And like so the path is like to create loving relationship with your shadow, like with all of these parts of yourself that don't necessarily need to be fixed. They need to be loved. And I've been on that journey too, where it's like the ultimate healing wasn't for me to like go deep down and sort of like get rid of or try to excavate any parts of me. It was just to really identify in a higher state of consciousness or of loving awareness, and shine that light of love onto those parts of myself. So I really resonate with that. I want to go out of answer and just through some of these questions, but we'll get to all of them. As how to spiritually overcome that guilt of charging for my online courses. I actually love this topic. This is like one of my favorite things to talk about. Is really just the this expansion of what I believe the divine is, and where this new spiritual conversation is moving. And when I think about in terms of just wealth creation, it's expanded and evolved into such a way where, as we know, or as we understand money, is that money is a neutral energy meant to support you. And as some of us are doing this amazing work, this healing, transformative work, I honestly am, I've, in my own work, in my own sort of inner work journey, I've worked with therapists, with coaches. I've worked with two therapists, particularly over the last 6 years. And there is some work that I've done through the online coaching space or through healers or whatever it is, whatever modalities that have shifted and have made lifelong shifts for me. Truly, they're the medicine. And so when I think about just the guilt around charging for these spiritual services, I'm like, we live in a world in which we charge crazy amounts of money for like medicine in a bottle, or like with a label on it from a doctor or wherever. And where I really see this evolving is that this industry, like the what we would be considered and wrapped into right now is the wellness industry. It's a $5.6 trillion industry. And right now, Harvard researchers are qualifying spiritual health to be so important, not only to chronic disease, but to overall wellness and overall being. And so, like Harvard researchers are now, so this is a paradigm shift where, 10 years ago, it was not on trend to have a therapist. People thought you had to have like severe mental illness to go to therapy. And now that's shifting. I honestly think the next 10, maybe five or 5 to 10 to 15 years, everyone's going to have a spiritual coach. Everyone's going to have a manifestation coach. Someone's going to have people to support your spiritual health and well-being. And so to me, I think that as we know that money is a neutral energy meant to support you, is that the more resource, more sort of empowered you are in terms of you being able to live into the fullest expression of who you are. That includes money, that includes your capacity to not only sort of nurture yourself, but also to expand your services to the world. Yes, I think that the spiritual industry separates itself and thinks that this is not a separate industry that needs this energy to prosper, but it's not true. I definitely believe that more money that is in the court and in the hands and the stewardship of light workers, of people that are conscious, is going to be for the ultimate benefit of the planet. That's the divine will, as I believe, is that there are more conscious billionaires and multimillionaires and centimillionaires on the planet, because that's how we would then facilitate the love that needs to be created and needs to flourish on the planet. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I love that, and I just wanna share too, I felt this really strongly, th this guilt around charging and setting time boundaries, financial boundaries, and I almost got to a place where I lost my business because I was just giving so much and I would just be like, "Oh, that's fine. I'll just help you," or "I just book this call," or "Just give this thing," and I was just giving and giving and giving, and I actually I almost got to a place where I had nothing to give anyone because we live in the real world. We have bills to pay. We have a life. It costs money to run a business. It costs money and then I'm an expensive person, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like it's I actually can give so much more when I have resource, when I have abundance, when I can do things, and what I find is that when I'm in a more abundant state, I actually think about more ways that I can give. I actually have more giving pathways open because there's not a pressure to like, it's gotta be like this or it's gotta be like that. So I think bringing in and this won't speak as much to the emotional part because I know this is a deeply personal journey for all of us, but bringing in more maturity and being more intelligent about where do I want to create spaces that I can give some things for free and trying to make more and more valuable content on social media, on YouTube and stuff like that. Cause that does fill one thing that I think is important, but then also honoring the value of like I don't even know how many hours, like thousands and thousands and thousands of hours honing my craft and hundreds of thousands of dollars on training. So it's like that has a value and we have to value the things that have value and people don't value things that we don't value. So I used to get messages. And so as I was transitioning and going through this, sometimes people would write me and say, "Oh, I have all this distress. Can you help me? Can you do a session?" And I was getting smarter. So I was like, I won't do a session, but I'll give you this course. That's exactly the thing that you need. And if you do the course and you still need help, then I'll help you. Guess how many of the people that I gave a free course to ever did the course? Zero. None. People don't value things that we don't value first. And so you've
Mm,
really got to look at like, how much did the stuff that's in this course impact my life? How much has it changed me? And what is the value of that? And you have to develop a relationship with value.
mm. Yes, I love that. And honestly, to add to this too, is the law of nature is abundance. The To know God is to know abundance. And so at the end of the day, as you were saying, Michael, as you are in the giving, as you are contributing in your own vessel through the expression of love, that's how you're receiving it back. So For me, it's always been about creating loving relationship with the things that I desire. So if it's money, like I always say this, is that the people that make a lot of money, they love money. And I think there's a guilt, or again, what we're talking about, this pandemic of shame for people in the spiritual world to not want money, to not love it. And what we're creating for next year is this express container. And it's really about us claiming our desires, but in this more fully express pure frequency. And if you desire fame, if you desire more visibility or more success and abundance in your business, your only job is to create loving relationship with that. In your oneness with that desire, you completely eliminate all of those frequencies of guilt, of shame, of unworthiness. Okay, so one thing I know, Kira, you asked a question which I want to get to, and it was something along the lines of what really activated the spiritual journey, the spiritual awakening for us, and like how that's been moving for us. To be quite honest, like, again, I go back to what I said earlier, where many are many are called, but only few are chosen, and that you're chosen if you answered the call. For me, I know that I guess there's a part of my soul that answered the call, and I guess in my own free will, I accepted the call. But there's also this part of my soul that also feels just like my spiritual alarm clock went off and I couldn't ignore it. Like it was this thing where I have this whole funny bit about God where I'm like, he's calling you, you're leaving him on red, he's texting you, he's blowing up your phone. And at a certain point, there's like this spiritual like urge that's just saying you have to step into the fullest version of yourself. You have to leave that job. You have to move to that place. You have to do this thing. And so I think that there's this journey, again, you might call it the hero's journey, that so many of us are called to. But on one hand, I do feel like my soul has chosen this. But on the other hand, I'm like, I don't know if I had a choice. I just feel like my awakening was just so exactly. And you're saying the pull is so strong. It's just so strong that like actually I learned this in terms of energetics, that it actually takes more energy to repress. It takes more energy to hold back your authentic self than it is to express it. And so I just submitted and I surrendered to the version of myself that was becoming. And I think a lot of us have no real capacity to do anything else but that. You said, "Yes, I felt that so much." It's once you're called, you can't go back. And even though my ego wanted to, yes, we've all seen that scene in The Matrix where they awaken from the Matrix and then he just like, wants to go back and have a steak and he just wants to go back into the thing. And I do feel like a lot of us on the spiritual path, we do go through that where there's this new version of ourselves that's forming, and then we've crossed the bridge, and then we can't even go back to it's almost like the bridge went away, it dissolved, and we can't even go back, like, those doors have been closed. And that's really what, we are starting the first live about, was that as you're stepping into this path of authenticity, of divine expression, Michael and I, we call it spiritual disruption. We're having this amazing 3-month container to kick off the next year around, and what is really there is this invitation to step into that expansive authenticity. And for me, I think authentic power and purpose is the one thing that most of us are missing in terms of being on the edge of creation and really leading. And I think that people that are here to actually lead and to chart out that next vision is there's this piece here of coming into your divine beingness, which is what that connection point is to your authentic power and purpose.
So good.
Yes.
I always want to give like a juicy thing to reflect on too. So I know
Yeah,
there's like so many
please.
amazing people here, and
Yeah.
I want to I want to give you something to contemplate, because we talk about shame, but I think a lot of the times we don't realize how often things like guilt and shame can be masquerading as other things, particularly when we're very self aware. It's as we get more clever, they get more clever in the shadows. And so I really want you to think about your relationship with perfectionism, because for a lot of us, we have this thing with perfectionism. We go, it has to be really high quality, has to be so good, and it holds us back in different ways. I know you and I, Chris, have talked about this. It's like
Yeah.
everything has to be like a certain degree of like filtered or refined, and that's
Polish.
your
Yeah.
yeah, polish. Yeah, so that's your first clue, is if you're like, yeah, but I have, high standards or whatever, that's actually the story that you're telling yourself to validate the defense mechanism that you have around it. And underneath that, way, way, way down somewhere is shame, because it's the shame that who I actually am isn't good enough in some way and they'll be rejected. And so I need to create this level of polish or perfectionism. So I just want to give you
Yeah.
that as a contemplation because I think sometimes we're like, oh yeah, like I'm pretty good. I don't have shame all the time. But how often are you a perfectionist? That's a
Yeah.
totally different conversation.
Exactly. Or I was working with a coach who once told me that sometimes we can't even see our shame or we can't see our unworthiness until we're in the presence of something that makes us feel unworthy. So like for me, when I'm like, with a guy like on a date that I find very attractive, I'm like, suddenly I can't talk and I like don't know what I'm saying and I'm trying to prove myself. And I'm like, oh, because now there's this stimulus that's put me in the presence of something that I don't feel worthy of in front of. And so it is this idea of being able to hold energetic authority in divine beingness and truth of your authenticity and just your worth, right? No matter where you are, whether you're in a room of billionaires, in a room of millionaires, like on a yacht, like can you stay in that version of yourself that feels worthy, that feels enough? And I think that you're absolutely right. That the ego is your most clever mental power used against you. And it's not nefarious in its intention, but what it does is that it's trained, its sole purpose is to keep you safe, it's to keep you alive. But we're no most of us aren't really living in survival except in our minds. And part of what this healing journey is like shifting us into that more conscious, heart-led version of ourselves, not from anxiety, not from fear, not from not being able to express ourselves because we think that it's dangerous. And so to what you were saying that really spoke to me was that I think most people underneath they have these two thoughts. That's one, it's not safe to be seen, and also, I'm not worthy of being seen. It's these 2 thoughts that are like, 1, yes, and maybe as a child, it wasn't safe to be seen. I just had a few sessions with people telling me about their childhoods and things like that, and it was not safe for them to be expressed, like, with their parents or just in their family experience. So it's almost a retraining and a reconditioning of reminding yourself that it is hopefully, depending on your immediate surroundings, safe for you to be the version of yourself that God is calling you to be. And if it's not immediately safe, then there's a pathway that of creation that is unfolding for you to be that highest version of yourself, because that's what the world needs, in my opinion.
Totally, and I love that example of being on the date because that's it. That's your uncomfortable edge, and that's the thing. We all have that uncomfortable edge that we lean into, and then those things are activated. And really, that's what our container expressed is all about, is leaning into those uncomfortable edges altogether. In fact, going after them and then
Yeah.
having all of the support around working through and growing through what comes up.
Absolutely. I think that oh, I love that you've really painted that visual because for sure it's like on this expansion, right? Like we're up leveling and so many people are like, I want the up level. I want the up level. It's so funny. And it's, oh, but do you want to be brought to the edge of your shadow, which is like the subconscious fears that are the antithesis of what you desire? And so I think that I find that to be just a very interesting journey. I think for a lot of us and people that I know you and I are calling in and the work that we do, I found a way to create it to dance with this healing or whatever you want to call it, this work of, I you said earlier, Siobhan, about shadow play, like playing with your shadow, right? There's this part of me that also sees it as like alchemy. Like, oh, what do I get to alchemize right now? What do I get to transmute right now? Oh, I'm feeling intense shame right now. I'm feeling intense grief. I'm feeling like sadness or despair. Oh, I'm feeling stressed because I don't know. I just lost a client. Like, so, and I feel rejected in my business or whatever it is. Like, knowing that that is the invitation, again, spiritual invitation to not pile on yourself or judge yourself or blame yourself or go straight into fix it mode. It's that spiritual invitation to alchemize that with love. Like, how do I create loving relationship in the same way that like a child or a best friend, we would support them and say, we love you. You're doing the best you can. It's amazing. Like, how do I create that bond within myself? That's the container of unconditional love that then we get to give and be an extension of to the world through all of our various mediums. I don't know. I've played now with this idea of like alchemy, transmutation, but like really going through that alchemical process of unconditional love, being the sort of process of transformation. And I think that that to me is like, it's still not always easy, but to me, I'm like, oh, wait, this emotion has visited me, information for me to step into a deeper relationship of love for self. That's how I see it.
Yeah, amazing. And all the only thing I'd want to add to that is just and having that take place at all the levels of mind, unconscious, subconscious, conscious.
Yes.
Some people like talk about the super conscious, which is like higher self, but having all of that shift together, I find it's like getting the crew of a ship all aligned to the same mission, and then you can move forward. And that I think is just like the beauty of like really doing this work and committing to it.
Yes, I love that. And I love this comment. Thanks, Siobhan. It says, oh my God, the real reason people don't want you to grow is, hey, they don't want to have to feel their shame. And yes, and I also think that sometimes we don't want to grow because we don't want to feel our shame. It's this very interesting tug of war that we have with like ego and spirit, where spirit is inviting you to step into that fullest version of yourself, and the ego is protecting you and keeping you small. But it reminds me of this Marianne Williamson quote where she says, "Your playing small doesn't serve the world." And I just love this, is that it is a challenge, right? It's a spiritual challenge to step in faith, to become the version of self that you're called to be. This is my hypothesis that like, I don't know, 95% of the planet is not self-actualizing as the version of themselves that that they would want to be. And it's not because of that they don't have any capacity to do so or whatnot. It does take guts. And I think that to transcend and to move into this goes back to what we said earlier, is that many are called, but only few are chosen, and that you're chosen if you answered the call. And so answering the call means to say that you are now becoming the hero of your life. And in doing so, that is always this ripple of love, prosperity, and abundance that you get to create because you stepped out into that version of yourself. And so the shame for me, the star frequency is that if more of us were shining our light on the planet, this would be a completely different planet. I talk about how a star that doesn't shine becomes a black hole. And so a star that doesn't shine becomes a black hole means that a star that doesn't shine rots from within. And you told me this, Michael, which I absolutely love, is that just think about if the sun just decided it didn't want to shine today. It was just like, I'm over it. I'm just not going to shine. And so many of us are living our lives that way, where it's like we have this shiny gift, we have this truth inside of us, we have a book inside of us, we have music inside of us, but we're not shining because a parent that we're afraid to be judged by, or a family member, or people on Instagram, or whatever. But it's like your shining gives people the subconscious permission to do the same. And so, again, it's that ripple of that contagious movement that we're all here to create of love if you decide to shine.
Yes. So good. I love when you go into your son and develop it. So good.
Oh,
And it was to speak to what you were saying earlier, because that's like we were talking about the uncomfortableness of stepping into that because the contrast of that is staying the same and staying safe, right? You're like, when we talk about this, you're like, shine, change the world, be the magic, all the things. Like, why you're like, why wouldn't you be that? The desire to be safe is so profound. And it might even just be subconscious, but that we really have to work through that in so many different ways, because that's the thing, right? It's like when you're on that date with that guy like you were talking about earlier, it's actually the safe thing feels like it's to just go with someone that doesn't feel that intimidating. It's just you're
oh
just kind
my
of like, oh
God.
yeah, this person, but that's the frequency of
Not
stuff.
you leading me through some inner work for tonight. God, I'm like, oh my
But
God, you're so right.
that's because that takes us to the frequency of settling. That's the opposite of it's like settling. It's like us being a lesser version of ourselves, which
Mhm.
creates the energetic match for a life of settling. which is what most people are experiencing when you talk about, I can't remember the word you used, but like the collective or the pandemic of unworthiness. It's that's the manifestation of that unworthiness is a life that you settled for
Oh
safety.
my god. I love that. And yeah, that is that it's so interesting because I do truly believe that in our desires, the word desire in Latin means of the fathers. They used to believe that, or maybe they still believe, is that our desires, they come from God. They're pure because they're spiritual invitations for us to transform. And I love that. Like when somebody is, my desire is to be highly visible or to make a lot of abundance in business or to become famous or to have that like soul partnership. Like again, I feel like what happened in this ego at an egoic level of consciousness is that those desires are separate from God's dreams, those God's desires. Like Oprah Winfrey says that God is dreaming through her. So her life is a testimony of God's desires unfolding because she's just the vessel. She knows that she's on control of life, she's being lived. And so the divine gets to be fully expressed through her life. And so any of us that like feel a little bit of that like ickiness or that sort of sticky energy around like not feeling worthy to claim that desire is that in doing so, you're not actually separating yourself from God. You're actually connecting even deeper in relationship with God. Anyone that knows this knows that like you're seeking more abundance or business or visibility or whatever, is that it's now calling you into higher relationship. And so, I don't know, I guess for me, there's this part of wanting to help, like, blast away everyone's shame and just say, "No, actually, if you want that soul partnership, that is not only a blessing for you, but it's always gonna be a blessing for everyone else around you, for the world around you, because you get to be that version of yourself that feels supported." And so, we live in a win-win universe. So, when you receive your desires, the rest of the world is winning. And it again, if you like you said, if you settle for that other version of yourself, it's a lose-lose universe. It's like if the sun doesn't shine, what would happen if Beyonce didn't shine? If Eckhart Tolle or whoever, Tony Robbins, whoever people are inspired by, doesn't get up and shine, then again, the world gets to exist in a world that didn't have that person, didn't have that star. And I think that there are more stars that God is waiting to reveal and to unveil in this next chapter of creation.
My God, so amazing. I'm just like, I love that we were like, we're gonna come on for 15 minutes. It's
Yes, I
like even
know.
like an hour.
This is so good. Oh my God. Yes. Thank you guys for everyone that's talking. This when you were talking about community before, I was just reflecting on these conversations. Not just the same recycled spiritual information we're all climbing together and seeing new. Thank you so much. Yes, I think that that is so important because for me, honestly, I think about it like going to the gym. Sometimes you just don't want to go to the gym, but the gym holds a frequency. So when you go into the gym, oh, you're like, "Oh, fuck, everybody's running, everybody's working out, so I guess I'll do it too." And it definitely lifts you into the frequency of performance, and that's why people a lot of people are working from home now, but offices do help with that culture of really raising the performance of the people in the office. And I think that in community, a very big example is Think and Grow Rich. Napoleon Hill, he talks about how people like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison understood the power of the mastermind, and that when you surround yourself with people that are at a certain level, you are psychically absorbing their frequencies. And I have a client who's an investor. So he goes golfing with billionaires and millionaires. And so he's psychically absorbing their frequencies, their mannerisms, just the way that they conceptualize and think about money. And there's no actual healing in it's he's going to start to mirror. And then in his business, he's seen incredible shifts and deals come through and stuff like that. So I do 100% believe that we are relational beings and we're always exchanging energy. And so to be in community with those that are also very spiritually expanded, I think really is one of the keys to success, if not the most important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you guys are interested in joining us, I think we both have the links on our pages. And yes, so good. I can literally
Thanks.
feel the vibration. rising
Oh my god,
listening to
that's
us.
so
I
cute.
love it.
Thank
I'm so
you.
happy. I know we feel that too whenever we talk to
Yes.
each other. We're always like, let's have this conversation. And then we both end up being like,
We're just like lost in the frequencies. Yes.
Chris always
Yeah,
texts me like a half a day later. That was a vibe.
that was such a
Like,
vibe. We're gonna be doing these a lot more too, all
yeah.
this week as well. So we hope to see you back. And yeah, as Michael's saying, if you want to join us in January, we have the links in our bios. Yeah, we're just thank you for all the support, and we are all supporting you. So thank you for being here too.
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for joining us today. We're sending you so much love and bye for now.